Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here, and before we jump into our show, I wanted to share a resource with you that can help you get your podcasting off the ground. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it is 100% free and really easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad to you. So if you want to get started with podcasting and you want to make it as simple as possible, go ahead and visit anchor.fm/start. Now, let's jump into our show. Hey everyone, this is Dr. William Clark here. So excited to be with you today on this MLK Day. This is a day that we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it's exciting to be alive during this time because there are so many legacy organizations that have been created in the nonprofit space in response to what Dr. King created and what he launched during his lifetime. We all know him for the work that he's done with his many speeches, his marches, the movements that he's launched. And many of you who are working in the nonprofit space, your organizations were inspired by a leader who felt that the dream that Dr. King believed in, that he launched, that he put forward was in fact worthy. That dream was worthy to live on in the form of the nonprofit you're working in right now. And when you consider the sacrifice that went into launching your nonprofit, I think we all can just take a moment and say thank you to the legacy of Dr. King, and thank you to those individuals who might have heard something that he said or might have been influenced by something that he said or did over the years to launch the organization you're a part of. And human services is an effort or is an example of what it means to have that legacy live on. And so we say thank you to Dr. King. We say thank you to the work that he's done. And we also say thank you and kudos to those leaders, those entrepreneurs, those innovators, those people who were trailblazers that launched the organizations that we are part of, who are doing this, who have done this in response and service to the legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, celebrating his day today and his legacy and work, I think, puts into perspective our podcast for today. We are focused on how to continue our journey on to fundraise for the organizations we care so deeply about. And I think that, you know, the effort that we put into fundraising has to be tied to some sort of legacy we believe in. An idea that we believe is worthy of chasing, an idea that is worthy of building upon. And I want to use this podcast to talk about how to break through the limits of your ability to sell your nonprofit. This topic is essential when it comes to fundraising. You have to, one, sell your nonprofit. That is an essential task, an essential skill that you must master in order for you to get good, if not great, at fundraising. And many of you are saying, well, that's cool and all, but I have a struggle selling the nonprofit that I represent and breaking through my own limitations and my own ideas of what a salesperson is, breaking through my own ideas of what fundraising is and what it takes to fundraise. Well, I want to walk you through that a little bit. And before I do that, I do want to kind of share this too with you that, you know, I've been working with my church over the past a couple of weeks as of this podcast recording, talking about how to remove the distractions to hear clearly, to hear God clearly, to hear purpose clearly. And we had to walk through and acknowledge that what makes it hard to hear from God are all the distractions that are created by life, created by the environment around us, and everything that we allow in our space that does not align with who we are as people living for purpose, living on purpose, looking to find purpose and all this great stuff. And I offer that to you, that this is not one of the points I wanted to share, but I think it's worth sharing, that if you feel like you are limited in your ability to fundraise and sell your nonprofit, then part of the challenge you're dealing with is trying to overcome the distractions that exist within you or around you. And all of that has a ripple effect on your ability to sell. And so we're going to walk through how to deal with those distractions. But the topic I want to walk through again is how to break through the limits of your ability to sell your nonprofit. Now, you're in the sales business, as you know, to generate revenue for your nonprofit, to generate income for your nonprofit in various ways. We know that we can generate revenue from grants and donations. We can generate revenue from fundraisers. You can also generate revenue from business ownership, having a percentage stake in a business and earning your income through some sort of investment or business operated by your nonprofit. And you can do all that stuff, but you still have to break through the limits that you may have in order to sell your nonprofit, to bring partners along, to bring people along who are going to say, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with the purpose that you're putting forward, and I agree with the mission that you are selling. And so how do you do that? Well, here are a couple of things that you want to think about when you're trying to break through your own limitations to sell your nonprofit. The first thing I want to encourage you to do is to keep your eyes on the goal at hand. This is the epicenter of it all. You're in this business to generate revenue, and you're in this business to make things happen financially so that you can have the resources you need to pay the bills, to keep your nonprofit around, to pay staff, to pay rent, and all this great stuff. And without revenue, it is difficult, if not impossible, for you to do anything for your nonprofit of substance. It becomes very difficult. Imagine trying to run a nonprofit without having the money to pay the bills. Imagine trying to run the nonprofit without having the money to pay the rent or the electric bill or the water bill or the gas bill. Okay. Imagine running a nonprofit, a full-fledged nonprofit, without the money to pay for staff who are going to dedicate 8 and 9 hours a day working in this nonprofit to build it up to what you want it to be. Okay. And when you think about that difficulty, then you got to understand that it's important for you to keep your eyes on the goal at hand. The goal for the fundraiser in chief, whether it's a CEO, whether it's the chief development officer, whether it's the director of development, etc., is to raise money to support this vision, to support this purpose, to support what is going on in this nonprofit. If there is difficulty in raising money, then there's going to be difficulty in the nonprofit finding the resources to keep its doors open and to stay alive. You have tons of clients who are reliant upon you, who need your services, who need what you are providing, who need what you deliver on a daily basis. If you don't have the money in place to pay these bills and to make this happen, then the clients that you have built up over the years, who have trusted you with their lives and their growth opportunity, are going to struggle. I know you're not the only nonprofit that does this, whatever this is, but you put your clients in position to readjust and to go to another organization that may not treat them the same way you treat them, who may not provide the exact same services that their clients like and enjoy, etc. And so when you're trying to sell your nonprofit to funders and to partners and to sponsors, you have to break through your own limitation, and it begins with having a goal and keeping your eye on the goal. Even if you feel like you're not the best salesperson, you consider yourself an introvert, you don't know how to close, that can be worked on. That can be worked on, absolutely. But you have to have the goal in mind. What is the goal? How much do you need to raise every year, every quarter, every month, every week? What is the goal? And when you have your eyes on the goals that are associated with your fundraising capacity, you increase the chances of meeting those goals. How is that possible? It's possible because you're extremely focused on that one thing that matters so much. And that one thing cannot be, oh, I'm trying to raise money. Nope, that is not the one thing. Of course, that's your job description. That's your job to raise money and to do that. But the goal is, you can look at it in several ways. Your goal can be numeric based, which is to say that my goal is to raise $1 million in the next 12 months. Or your goal could be, my goal is to make sure that the programs that are operated by this organization have the resources it needs to function in perpetuity or for the next 5 years. Either way, that is the goal, right? Because if you put a dollar amount on it, it gives you clarity in terms of, okay, check mark every little dollar, nickel and dime, penny I collect, and it brings me closer to my $1 million goal. If your goal is to make sure the programs have operational support and they can function in perpetuity or over the next 5 years, what you're saying is your organization has done a good job setting a budget. And your organization has done a good job establishing solid expenses. And as long as those expenses are solid and you can meet those numbers every year, it will be around. That, however you slice this, you got to keep your eyes on the goal at hand. That's it. And when you realize deficiencies in your skill or in your job function, you can then choose the type of training you need to take to get better at whatever you're weak at. Yep, you can get better at sales, you can get better at closing, you can get better at marketing, you can get better at convincing people to trust you. You can get better at positioning your message and all this great stuff. Trust me, as someone who teaches this stuff, who shares this stuff with customers and students all the time, as someone who continues to read and take trainings on these topics, you can get better at this stuff. So when you're trying to break through your own limitations to fundraise and sell your organization, the first thing you got to do is keep your eyes on the goal at hand. The second thing that you got to do is, as you have your focus on the goal, whether it's $1 million, whether it's to have funding for the targeted programs in perpetuity, you have to establish a plan. How are you going to get from the moment you are today, the dollar amount you are today, to the target dollar amount? Whether it's $1 million or whether it's the targeted budget of the program, whatever the case may be. How are you going to get there? What's the strategy to take you from this point to the next? I think, the absence of a plan has caused a lot of development people, grant writers, fundraisers to kind of lose track of what it takes to get from point A to point B. And the interesting thing about not having a plan is the absence of a plan causes you as a professional, a development professional, a fundraiser in chief, to lose the muscle memory or to develop new muscle memory that makes you sharp, that makes you effective, that makes you impactful. I was reading a book, and there was a comment in the book that talked about the importance of boxing as an example of what leadership is like. And the line goes something like this, where it says that a boxer has to prove he has discipline on a daily basis. If he doesn't discipline himself on a daily basis prior to his fight, it will show up in the fight. So, for example, boxers are known to go for long morning runs, like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But if that boxer was cheating on the runs over the training period of the training camp he was a part of for the upcoming fight, it would show up because he would be fatigued very early on. And that fatigue is a result of the boxer not disciplining himself during his training camp period or practice. And in order to practice the things that will build up the stamina, you need to go 12 rounds or to be your most influential, powerful self, if you will, the self that is accurate and on target, you have to have a plan of attack. And the plan of attack does not get executed during the fight. The fight is just the theatrics of and the culmination of what you've been doing all this time. In fact, your plan of attack gets executed during practice. And that plan is what gets you from point A to point B. If execution is followed up and followed through during practice, and you need a plan to do that, then this again justifies the importance of having a plan. Well, how do we do that? You go through your morning runs, you go through your daily routine. We're going to build muscle and strength in these areas. We're going to sharpen your skills, how you throw your punches, how you establish good defensive practices for this particular fighter. How do you counter punch? How do you counteract this move and that move? We're going to practice on this every day. And the plan is laid out, and the plan has subset details associated with it, so that when the fight comes, you as the boxer, you've practiced this so much, your plan has been established so much and thoroughly, that the execution of it all is nothing more than muscle memory that you've established. This is the same concept as it relates to fundraising, that when you finally get the chance to pitch your organization, whether it's in person, whether it's through a application, etc., it becomes important that you don't see that as the culmination of a plan. No, the practice and the planning process happens way before you meet the funder. Because most of the time when you meet a funder, you're pitching the same story, the same message, the same program, just with little variations from funder to funder. But the plan itself is how you prepare for that moment. The plan itself is how you position yourself for that moment. The plan itself is how you organize your thoughts, your words, your stories, your vision for a future that is compelling and relevant to a funder. How are you going to execute on this vision once you get the revenue and the sources? The plan itself are the details of that choreographs point A to point B, from point B to point C, from point C to point D, etc., etc. And without the plan of attack, how do you close the deal on the $1 million you're trying to raise? How do you close the deal on the funding goals for the program you're supporting? We have a free webinar that you can register for, how to triple fundraising results without chasing funders. You can go to mysixfigurefunding.com. Again, that's mysixfigurefunding.com. We have this free webinar, and we talk about the 3 secrets that we use to triple fundraising results without chasing funders. Now, you're going to hear the secrets on the webinar, but you got to trust and believe that there's like a more detailed plan as it relates to that. As we pursue funding opportunities, as we explore them, as we position ourselves for that stuff. And the plan itself is nothing more than us following through on a choreographed number of steps that have positioned us to be where we are, where we're not chasing funders. And at the end of the day, you're trying to position yourself to do the same. So what's your plan? Or are you just going to get to the boxing ring and start swinging and throwing haymakers, hoping that you knock out their presentation and get the funding you're looking for? That's not how that works. You may get lucky in one fight, or you may get lucky and strike a blow, but it doesn't mean you'll actually win the bout or the match. The plan means a lot, and it begins with how you prep. So how do you overcome your limitations to sell and market your nonprofit and to generate revenue for your nonprofit? Keep your eyes on the goal. Establish a clear plan that makes a ton of sense. The next thing I want to encourage you to do, and this is harder than anything else that I share with my students and my clients in our Grant Writing 101 Masterclass. The hardest thing for them to do, and it was hard for me too, is to jump and start selling. When you have an idea about what you need to do to get from point A to point B, which is, the planning process, you got to start selling immediately. Now, it's hard for people to do that because I'm telling them to jump out there and start doing something, even with all their insecurities and all the limitations that they possess, and the plan is not all the way thorough and well thought out. And I'm encouraging them to jump and start selling. The reason I encourage that, and the reason it's a generally good practice, is because when you start jumping and selling, you start learning much more faster. You can sit here and take a class. You can take my grant writing 101 masterclass, all 11 hours of it, and you can sit there and take notes and review it and review it and review it until you get out there and launch your practice, or you launch your plan, or whatever it is you're launching. All of the reading, all of the listening to the lectures that I provide aren't going to mean a thing to you. If you are out here taking all these courses and not practicing at all, you're not really learning. The power of practicing and jumping and starting to sell immediately comes in this, right? You have access to all this information, whether it's my grant writing 101 masterclass, my grant writing 101 book, my book Sustainable, my book Leverage, and all my other courses, right? You have stuff like that that's available to you. And you can hear my view, you can hear my voice, you can hear my tone and how I approach things. But if you don't take that information and contour it to your personality, what good is that information at all? If it doesn't apply to your personality, or if you don't find out ways that you can deploy the core principles that I teach, what good is it at all? You have to take what you are receiving and you have to position it. You have to position it in your life to be functional and useful so that you can be effective and impactful in achieving results. If you cannot do that, if you are not allowing yourself to do that, you're going to be in a stuck position reading and taking classes with no productivity, no results. You have to take classes and read books and get advice and counsel and coaching, and then go out and do the work. That's what's going to make you effective. That's what's going to take you out of your shell. That's what's going to put you in position to learn and to grow and to mature as a professional. That's what's going to give you the results you're looking for. You got to start selling. I can't tell you how many times I have taken on projects over my career that I have taken classes, I've gotten counsel, and I've tried it once, kind of, and got no results, and I quit. I have taken classes, got counsel, and I didn't try anything, and then the thing died. And then there's a third scenario where I've taken classes, read information, got counsel, and I just did it with full faith, with full belief, with no fear, with full conviction. And even though the results didn't yield anything, what meant more to me over my career were the moments that I tried something and I just jumped and started doing it with everything that I had. I remember clearly the day that I relaunched my real estate business. Now, the truth is, it took me 3 years to get to the relaunch, not because I was waiting to do something. Actually, once the business died, I killed the business. I just let it go. And 3 years later, I was listening to a podcast and just getting counsel and just taking in some information that this particular person was sharing. And I listened to it for, let's say, a good 3 to 4 weeks, just nonstop. And I got deeply inspired. Once I figured out what he was saying and what he was teaching and how it actually made sense relative to the real estate business and relative to what I was doing and what I could do different and what could be different about the future. Once I got it, I said, oh, okay, well, let me try it. What's the harm? Let me make this investment and do the work. And even after I jumped, there was no traction. But the second week, there was traction. The third week, there was more traction. Week 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and it kept on going. And while the traction and the momentum kept building and building and building and building, I also kept learning and re-listening and rereading everything that I read up to that point, which meant that everything that I glossed over, things that didn't mean anything to me, things that didn't connect with me, all of a sudden had meaning and purpose. Yep. There are times where we are getting counsel. There are times where we're taking in information, we're taking courses, and we gloss over things that we didn't notice or didn't pick up before. And when you start to jump and sell and practice and start to put into action all the things that you believe you need to do, everything you missed, you'll start to realize. And you'll reread and find some more stuff, and reread and find some more stuff, and reread and find some more stuff. And it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. The best learning that can happen in your life comes from jumping and starting the sales process. You will learn a lot about yourself during the fundraising process if you just go through the process and start planning. Keep your eyes on a goal and just jump. Of course, you want to be professional and you want to make sure you jump with as much information as you can, but jump. Jump. Prepare that next sales pitch. Jump. Prepare for that next coffee session with a funder or individual donor. Jump. Prepare for that next business meeting with that local business that you're going to partner with to generate revenue for your nonprofit. Jump. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're preparing to reach the $1 million goal, multi-million dollar goal, jump and watch how much you will learn on the journey. You want to focus on how to break through the limits of your ability to sell your nonprofit. The next thing you got to do is tweak information or tweak your performance along the way. This goes back to the jumping process, right? You can't tweak anything you haven't started. You can't improve anything you haven't started. Have you ever been in a situation where you might have let's go here for a second, right? You've launched an MLM business back in the day. We've all done it. And I know for me, when I tried to launch a few of them back in the day, I could not understand it. And I'm going to tell you now, I totally understand them clearly today, even though I don't run one. But back in the day, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the pitch process, the sales process, the marketing process, none of that process. And as I was trying to understand it, I was trying to tweak a plan that clearly worked for a ton of other people. But I was trying to tweak a plan that I didn't execute. And I kept tweaking and never launched anything. And when I launched it, I was so doubtful because of the constant tweaking I was making on a static product or static business that didn't go anywhere. And the relevance to that is many of us have goals. We have $1 million goal, right? And we have $1 million plan. But we wait 6 months to launch that plan because we keep tweaking it. And the tweaks we make, if you don't realize it, are sometimes, if not many times, irrelevant to the marketplace because you're making tweaks based upon what you think, what you believe, and you're not making tweaks based upon what the people with the money are saying. We get in our own heads and we limit ourselves. We are limited by the feedback and pushback of people who aren't in the know. And we're limited by their feedback and pushback of people who don't have the money to give us. And so we respond to people with no money. We give our thoughts to people who don't have the money. We cede over control over our plans with people who have no money. And we end up tweaking a plan that we didn't need to tweak because of what people said who don't have the money to give us, who aren't contributing to the $1 million. It's different when you tweak your plan according to the feedback you're getting from people who are contributing to the $1 million. When somebody gives you $20,000 and says, hey, we're going to give you this $20,000 grant or this $20,000 award or partnership or sponsorship. But we think that there's a huge opportunity for you to get more people on board if you just tweak this a little bit. That feedback sounds so different, doesn't it? Somebody that gave you $20,000 and now they're saying you can tweak your approach, your message, you can get more people. And they're giving you this feedback not because you stink, but because they have access to a whole other world that they can introduce you to, and they know how those people think. Therefore, they're giving you the tools, the tips, the tricks to prepare for that future meeting and presentation. It means nothing for you to tweak a plan that has not been launched or executed. This is why you gotta be careful who you get advice to, or get advice from rather. This is why you gotta be careful with who you share your plans with, who you allow into your planning space. This is why you gotta be careful who you partner with, who you listen to. This is why people who are successful have mentors that are successful and more successful than they are, because the mentors who are 10, 20, 30 steps ahead of them can give them the real game of what works and doesn't work. Be careful to not get caught in the process of trying to tweak a plan you haven't launched. If you haven't jumped and started selling, stop tweaking. Just do it. Just launch, and you'll learn along the way, because you'll make mistakes, you'll find some successes, and you'll tweak and you'll get better. So we're talking about in this podcast how to break through the limits of your ability to sell your nonprofit and fundraise. We talked about keeping your eyes on the goal at hand. We talked about establishing a plan. We talked about jump and start selling. We talked about tweak along the way. And this is one more piece of guidance I have for you that I enjoy and I share often. You got to journal your journey. You got to practice everything that we talked about, and you got to repeat. The reason why I encourage people to journal is because journaling allows you to see the progress that has been made over a defined period of time. You can look back and see where you started and notice all the things that you did that were wrong, and all the fears you had and all the mistakes you made. And you can look back and say, wow, I can't believe I thought that. Because as you continue to get better, you launch and jump and you tweak along the way, you'll get further and further and further away from where you started. All the fears and all the limitations you held yourself against, all the fears and limitations that you held against yourself are no longer part of your normal. And you've created a new normal. And so the journal takes you back to when you began. And the journaling process not only does that for you, but what I found to be useful about the journaling process is, when I'm launching a new venture, or I'm launching a new project, program, organization, or whatever, and I need to be inspired and reminded of my mentality when I started other successful things in the beginning that turned out to be super successful, the journal reminds me of not the projects in the past, but the trends, right? The mindset overall, what's consistent with my mindset when I start a project, and that fear, that those butterflies in my stomach. Oh, okay, I remember that's normal. I remember because in project 3 and 7, in projects 8 and 9, I had those same feelings, and it's how I started, right? And then as the journal continues to go and I reread, I'm not reading for rehashing memories. I'm rereading to pull up principles and turning points that really shifted my thinking, shifted my approach, that shifted the strategies that we had, and the tweaks we made along the way. And as I'm reading the journal, I'm launching this new project. I'm starting a new journal entry, and I'm going to go through the journey again, but I have a head start, because I'm picking up where I left off my last growth area. So I don't have to rebuild my confidence. I don't have to rebuild my competency in an area that I already built up because of my previous projects. And so this is where the practice comes in, because practice is not about you doing something just so you can occupy your time before you have a chance to really launch and sell your organization. Really, practice is the work. Practice is the process. Practice is where you win the championship. Practice is where you close the deal. Practice is where you close the funder. Practice is where you write the grant. Practice is where you learn how to fundraise. Practice is where you learn how to have a successful fundraising event. Practice is it. People live for the stage, and they live to perform on the stage. But what they don't realize about the greats is that the stage is nothing more than me rehearsing in front of you what I've been practicing for hours and days and weeks and months and years and decades. The stage is just the culmination of the end of a practice period. When you are closing a funder, when you are positioning yourself to pitch a funder, you are putting yourself in position to not perform, but to rehearse in front of them what you've been rehearsing all this time. That's right. You can practice your grant writing. You can practice your pitches. You can practice your sales approaches, your marketing strategies by just doing it on smaller scales, getting real-time feedback, getting better, and doing it again and again and again and again. And this is where I close out the process of journal, practice, repeat. It is a repetitive process that you go on to build up the skill, to build up the stamina, to build up the capacity to be great, to be awesome, to be amazing. You cannot live for the stage of closing a funder, because while a haymaker may work every once in a while, a skilled boxer knows how to dodge a haymaker well before you throw it. And as they're dodging your haymaker, they know how to move back into position to give you a quick two-piece and knock you out. Funders will knock you out because they can see a haymaker coming a mile away. In order for you to knock out a performance, knock out a pitch, knock out a sales presentation, knock out a grant, you got to be sharp at doing the basic things very well and consistently so that you can get the same results. If you want to overcome your limitations, you got to challenge your limitations. You got to keep your eye on the goal at hand. You got to establish a plan. You got to jump and start selling. You got to tweak along the way, and you got to journal, practice, and repeat. You can do it, and I believe in you. And you want to know why I know you can do it? It's because you've reached the end of this podcast and you've been listening to this podcast, not just this episode, but for quite a while. And you've been consuming this information and you've been really digging in and digging in and digging in. If you've gotten this far, then I know you can overcome your limitations to market and sell your organization, to fundraise. I also encourage you to do two things. If you want to learn about the secrets that I use to triple fundraising results, join me on my next free webinar, How to Triple Fundraising Results Without Chasing Funders, by going to mysixfigurefunding.com. I also encourage you to join my grant writing one-on-one masterclass, over 11 hours of teaching. Tons of tools and tips and tricks and toolkits that have gotten me multi-million-dollar results in fundraising and in grant writing. I encourage you to join our grant writing one-on-one masterclass, which is all online. You can register by going to mysixfigurefunding.com. Go all the way to the bottom and click on that link that says grant writing one-on-one masterclass and join our class. Be the next student that's telling stories about the success that you are achieving because of the work you're doing, selling your and marketing your nonprofit. You can make it happen, and I believe in you, and I'm here to help you. Visit us at mysixfigurefunding.com. This is Dr. William Clark for the Dr. William Clark podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.